Imagine working your whole life, building a business, getting to your 70s ready to enjoy it all, and then having it ripped away in an instant.
It's a horrific thought, and that's exactly what happened to Eddie and Francis Sazowskis.
Owners of a thriving scrap metal yard in Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
Eddie's jalopy jungle.
Right, their story's going to take us deep into a 1988 cold case.
A case riddled with conflicting clues and questionable suspects.
This deep dive is going to leave us with more questions than answers, I think.
Well, even the initial crime scene throws up so many contradictions.
So we're talking about a junkyard inherently chaotic?
Exactly. How do you determine if robbery was the motive or if something more sinister was at play?
It's almost like trying to find a needle in a haystack, right?
Absolutely. And not only was the scene cluttered, the junkyard itself was full of potential murder weapons.
Tire irons, pipes, heavy machinery.
You name it.
But nothing definitively linked any of these objects to the crime.
No. And to add another layer of complexity, there's the discrepancy in the cause of death.
Right, Eddie was brutally bludgeoned.
While Francis was strangled.
So right away we have to ask, are we dealing with one attacker or multiple?
It's a crucial question and one that investigators grappled with from the very beginning.
The brutality of the scene points to a lot of rage.
Absolutely. But if we're considering motive, there's the annexation dispute to think about.
Eddie was fiercely opposed to the town annexing his 80 acres of land.
He was, and while the sources we've looked at indicate his opposition was mainly through legal channels,
Right.
it's worth exploring whether there was a more hostile undercurrent to those interactions.
Could local officials have resorted to such extreme measures just to get that property?
It's a theory that we can't dismiss outright. Were there any veiled threats? Any individuals who stood to gain significantly from Eddie's land being annexed?
These are questions that could lead us down a very different path.
Absolutely.
And then there's the teenager who was reportedly bragging at parties about committing the murders.
Oh yeah, that's a curious detail.
Was this just a desperate bid for attention, or could there be a grain of truth hidden beneath his boasts?
I think what's interesting about the teenager is how his story, even if ultimately baseless, highlights the impact of rumors.
Especially in a small town.
Exactly, in a tight-knit community like Sheboygan, these whispers, whether true or false, can really muddy the waters.
And cause a lot of distress for the victims' families.
For sure, it's like throwing a stone into a still pond. The ripples spread far and wide.
Speaking of ripples, one figure quickly emerges as the epicenter of suspicion in this case.
Roger.
A career criminal with a history of burglarizing local businesses.
Roger almost becomes this larger-than-life figure in the story.
He's described as a strong man who could make off with entire safes.
A truly intimidating presence.
But even with Roger, the evidence is largely circumstantial.
It is. He and his associates had alibis for the morning of the murders, but not the afternoon.
So the police clearly saw him as their prime suspect.
Oh, absolutely. They piled on charges for other crimes, hoping to pressure him into confessing.
But that strategy didn't work.
No, it didn't. And this is where the evolution of forensic science becomes really interesting.
Okay.
Back in 1988, DNA testing was in its infancy.
Right.
The sources mentioned that early tests on the victim's clothing were inconclusive.
If this crime happened today, the story might be completely different.
Oh, for sure. Modern DNA analysis is so much more sensitive and reliable, potentially extracting information from the tiniest traces of evidence.
It makes you wonder if those advancements could have solved this case decades ago.
Absolutely.
But as we'll see, the absence of that concrete evidence, coupled with the passage of time and, human error, creates a very tangled web of possibilities.
It does, and that's where things take a really strange turn.
Okay.
Years later, when Roger is on his deathbed, he confesses to the FBI.
He admits to it.
Yeah, but this confession, it's not a clear-cut resolution.
Oh, really?
It's more like opening another can of worms.
Okay.
He admits to going to the junkyard with his partners looking for money.
So that supports the robbery theory.
It does, but then he adds this detail about putting the couple in a closet.
Wait a minute, that doesn't match the crime scene at all.
Exactly.
Wait.
So it makes you wonder about deathbed confessions.
Are they a genuine desire to clear one's conscience? Or is there something else going on?
Could be clouded memories, a need to control the narrative even in death.
It's a fascinating psychological puzzle.
It is.
And then there's another question that comes up.
What's that?
Why did it take 8 years for the Sheboygan County Sheriff's Office to even learn about this confession?
Oh, gosh.
If they had known sooner, could they have gotten more details from Roger?
Yeah, it's possible. Clarified those inconsistencies.
Before it was too late.
It's a frustrating thought.
It is.
It really highlights how human error, bureaucratic mishaps can impact an investigation.
A missed fax, a
Ooh.
miscommunication.
Sometimes the smallest things can have huge consequences.
It's almost as if fate itself is working against the truth coming out.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but even with these setbacks, the case doesn't just disappear.
Right.
We learn about Eddie and Francis's great-nephew, Justin.
Yeah.
He takes it upon himself to uncover the truth, to find justice for his family.
This is where the human impact of this crime really hits home.
It does. Justin wasn't even old enough to understand what happened when his great-aunt and uncle were murdered.
But years later, he picks up the torch.
Driven by this profound sense of loss,
And a need for answers.
he dives headfirst into the case, pores over documents, conducts interviews, even uses social media to try to find witnesses.
It's really incredible.
It speaks to the strength of family and the pursuit of justice, no matter how much time has passed.
And in 2008, on the 20th anniversary of the murders, the Sheboygan County Sheriff's Office renews their efforts too.
They do. Billboards go up around town asking for information.
It's a powerful reminder that even in cold cases, hope never truly dies.
Sometimes all it takes is one person, one little detail, to break a case wide open.
And a new lead does emerge.
It does. A witness claims to have seen Roger at the junkyard on the day of the murders.
So that's got to be a big break.
It seems like it, but
Wow.
the witness's story, it starts to unravel. He claims he was Roger's cocaine dealer, but his memory of events is really inconsistent.
Oh, no.
He even contradicts what we know about the weather that day from records.
So another dead end.
It is, but it's not quite back to square one.
Okay.
Because this case, it remains active.
Oh, really?
The Sheboygan County Sheriff's Office is still working with state and federal authorities.
Oh.
They're even looking into using new polygraph techniques on Roger's old associates.
So they're not giving up.
Not at all. But after all this time,
Yeah.
what are the chances of finding a definitive conclusion?
Something beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's the question, isn't it? I mean, we've seen how the lack of physical evidence, the fading memories, the inconsistencies in Roger's confession have all contributed to this very complicated puzzle.
And even if they do identify those responsible, there's no guarantee they'll still be alive or face trial.
That's true. It really makes you think about justice, how sometimes, even with the best efforts, the truth can remain out of reach.
Yeah, it does. But even without a courtroom verdict, I feel like there's still a need for understanding.
Absolutely. What happened to Eddie and Francis on that November day, unraveling that mystery, even after all this time,
It's important.
it holds so much significance for their family, for the whole community.
It's about closure, isn't it?
It is.
Not just legal closure, but a human need to understand
To piece together those missing fragments.
so that Eddie and Francis's lives aren't defined by this unsolved crime.
Exactly.
I think it makes you realize that closure can mean different things for different people.
It can. For some, it might be about seeing those responsible held accountable.
Facing a trial.
Right. But for others, it might be about understanding the why,
The motive,
the circumstances that led to such a horrible event.
as we've been going through this case, what are your thoughts?
Well, for me, this case highlights the ripple effects of unsolved crimes.
It's not just the family who suffers, is it?
No, the whole community carries this weight, a sense of unease.
A question mark that lingers.
Exactly, and it also makes us think about the limits of our justice system.
The evidence gaps, human error, the passage of time.
It all makes finding the truth incredibly difficult.
What's striking is how much forensic technology has changed.
Oh, absolutely, especially DNA analysis.
Right? Imagine if those tools were available back in '88.
It could have been a completely different story.
It makes you think, if you were in Justin's shoes today, what would you do?
Would you keep fighting? Keep searching for answers after all these years?
That's the thing about these deep dives.
You're more than just presenting the facts.
They make you think critically, put yourself in someone else's shoes.
They force us to confront these complex issues of truth, memory, justice.
So as we wrap up our look into the unsolved murders of Eddie and Francis Sazowskis,
It's a case that stays with you.
it does, and we want to leave you with this thought. Sometimes the key to solving a case is hidden in plain sight.
Waiting for someone to recognize it.
That's where you, our listeners, come in.
If anything you've heard today sparks a memory, no matter how small it may seem, please reach out to the Sheboygan County Sheriff's Office.
Your insight could be the breakthrough this case needs.
It could bring peace to a family and closure to a community that has waited far too long for answers.
Remember, even after decades, the truth has a way of coming to light. And justice delayed doesn't always have to mean justice denied.